What breaks a mother's heart more, watching her son fail or watching him choose it? Rebekah had survived a lot. She left her family in Mesopotamia as a young woman and traveled hundreds of miles on the word of a stranger to marry a man she had never seen. She endured 20 years of barrenness. She felt 2 children wrestling violently inside her womb and heard the voice of God explain why. She was not a fragile woman, but there is one moment in her story, 4 words, tucked quietly inside Genesis 26, that tells you everything about what finally brought her to her knees. They were a grief, not a disappointment, not an inconvenience, a grief. The Hebrew word used here, morah, carries the weight of bitterness, soul-level bitterness, the kind that settles into your chest and doesn't leave. And the women who caused it. Most people barely know their names. Today, we're going to fix that. Because the story of Esau's wives is not a footnote, it is a window into the tension between 2 worlds, 2 bloodlines, 2 completely different understandings of what it meant to belong to God's covenant family. And when you understand who these women really were, where they came from, what they represented, you'll understand something about Esau that the Sunday school version never taught you. You'll understand why Rebekah wept, why Isaac went silent, and why one man's romantic choices nearly unraveled a generational promise. Stay with me. To understand why Esau's marriages hit his family like a shockwave, you have to understand the world they were living in. This is not suburban life with modern sensibilities about individual choice. This is the ancient Near East, somewhere around 1900 to 1700 BCE, depending on your chronology. The family of Isaac was a people without a country. They were sojourners, wanderers with flocks and tents, moving between Canaan and the Negev, always existing at the edge of other people's territory. They had a covenant, a divine promise of land, descendants, and blessing, but they didn't possess the land yet. They were living in the middle of peoples who didn't share their God, their ethics, or their understanding of the world. And that context matters enormously. Because when God called Abraham out of Ur, one of the core separations he was establishing was identity through lineage and covenant. The promise wasn't just spiritual, it was embodied, passed through bloodline, through marriage, through the family structure itself. This is why Abraham, in Genesis 24, made his servant swear an oath, hand under his thigh, the most solemn gesture available, that Isaac would not marry a Canaanite woman. Read that again. He didn't just suggest it, he made it a sworn covenant obligation. Why? Because the Canaanite peoples practiced religious systems that were fundamentally incompatible with covenant life. Child sacrifice, temple prostitution, idol worship woven into every meal, every harvest, every birth. To marry into those families wasn't just a romantic choice. It was a theological merger. It was importing an entire spiritual worldview into the household that God was building. Abraham understood this. Isaac understood this. Rebekah, who grew up in a different culture and crossed the ancient world to honor this covenant, absolutely understood this. Esau apparently didn't, or didn't care. And here's what makes it devastating. Esau was the firstborn. He carried the weight of the birthright. He was, by ancient Near Eastern custom, the inheritor of everything, the flocks, the blessing, the covenantal future. The pressure on his choices was not ordinary pressure. Every decision he made was watched by his parents, by the servants, by whatever wider community surrounded them. So when Esau, at the age of 40, went and married not 1 but 2 Hittite women, the silence that fell over that household must have been deafening. Genesis 6:34 gives us the names. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath the daughter of Elon the Hittite. 2 names, 2 women, 2 Hittites. Most people read past them in 30 seconds. But let's stop here, because these names carry more than genealogy. The Hittites. When you hear Hittite in a modern context, you might think of a distant ancient empire. And archaeologically, the Hittite Empire, the great kingdom centered in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, was one of the dominant powers of the ancient world. But the Hittites mentioned in the patriarchal narratives are a local Canaanite group, sometimes called the Sons of Heth, who lived in the highlands of Canaan. These were not foreign invaders, they were neighbors, landowners, the very people Abraham had carefully negotiated with when he bought the cave of Machpelah to bury Sarah. But neighborliness is not the same as covenantal compatibility. The local Hittite clans were deeply embedded in Canaanite religious culture. Their household practices, their worship, their social structures, all of it revolved around the religious ecosystem that Abraham's family had been called out of. Judith, daughter of Beeri. The name Judith is interesting. It is actually a Hebrew-sounding name derived from Yehuda, meaning praised or related to Judah. Some scholars suggest this may be a Hebrew adaptation or translation of an original Hittite name, a common practice when recording foreign names in the biblical text. Basemath, daughter of Elon. Basemath means fragrance or spice. It is a beautiful name, a feminine sensory name. But here's something most people don't notice. The name Basemath shows up again in Genesis 36, this time assigned to a different woman. In the genealogy of Esau's descendants, Basemath is listed as the daughter of Ishmael, and the woman called Mahalath in Genesis 28 seems to correspond to the same person. This has caused enormous scholarly discussion. Some suggest scribal variation. Some suggest different naming traditions between sources. What it tells us emotionally is that Esau's marital history was complicated and layered. Multiple women, shifting names, different traditions recording the same family from different angles. But here's what doesn't change across any version of the text: the grief. Genesis 26:35, they were a grief of mind unto Isaac and to Rebekah. The King James says grief of mind. The ESV says a source of grief. The Hebrew mora ruach, literally, bitterness of spirit. This wasn't a cultural difference they politely tolerated. This wasn't an awkward Thanksgiving dinner situation. This was bitterness that lived in the spirit. That altered the emotional climate of the entire household. And we have to ask, why? What were these women doing, or not doing, that caused that level of sustained anguish? The text doesn't give us a dramatic scene. No confrontation, no recorded argument, just that one devastating descriptor. And sometimes, what isn't said tells you everything, because bitterness that sinks into the spirit doesn't come from one event. It comes from 1,000 small moments. A refusal to honor the household's God, a dismissal of Rebekah's customs, divided loyalties when decisions had to be made. Children caught between two worlds, a covenant household, slowly filling with the very influences Abraham had sworn to keep out. Think about that for a second. Rebekah didn't just lose the culture of her son's home. She watched the covenant she had crossed a desert to enter begin to erode inside her own walls. We need to talk about Esau, not the cartoon villain version, not the impulsive fool who sold his birthright for soup, the human Esau. Because Esau is one of the most psychologically complex figures in Genesis, and one of the most misunderstood. Here is a man who was outdoors when others were indoors, a man of the field, of the hunt, of physical skill and presence. His father loved him in a way that felt almost instinctual. Isaac loved the taste of the wild game Esau brought home. There was something primal and satisfying about his eldest son, and Esau knew it. He was the firstborn, the heir apparent. In a culture where birth order was nearly sacred, he held the highest position in the family simply by existing first. But the prophecy spoken over his mother's womb said the older would serve the younger. Imagine growing up in that shadow. Imagine being the firstborn son, strong, capable, beloved by your father, and somehow knowing, on some level, that your younger brother was considered the chosen one. That Jacob, the quiet, domestic, calculating Jacob, was already positioned as the future in ways you couldn't fully see or fight. How do you carry that? How does that kind of displacement shape your choices? I want to be careful here. The text doesn't give us Esau's inner monologue. We can't read his motivations directly, but we can read his patterns. At 40 years old, Esau marries, not once, but twice simultaneously. Both women are Hittites. Both are from the culture his grandparents explicitly warned against. Was this ignorance? Possibly. But he grew up in a household shaped by Abraham's covenant. He knew the weight of those boundaries. Was this defiance? Perhaps not conscious defiance, but there is something in the pattern of a man who sold his birthright for a bowl of stew, who lived for now, who valued the immediate over the promised, that suggests Esau's choices were consistently oriented toward what felt good, what was available, what was present, rather than what was covenantally sacred. He was not a villain. He was a man who kept choosing the visible over the invisible, the immediate over the eternal, the world in front of him over the world his family was building toward. And his marriages were the most vivid expression of that pattern. Because when you choose a spouse, you are not just choosing a person. You are choosing a future. You are choosing which world your children will be raised in. You are choosing whose God will be honored at your table. Esau chose twice. Both times, the same direction. Both times, away from the covenant. And what's almost unbearable is this. There is no recorded confrontation. No scene where Isaac sits Esau down and says, "This cannot happen." No recorded moment where Rebekah weeps openly and tells her son what his choices are costing her. Just silence and bitterness and a grief that had no outlet. There is a moment in Genesis 28 that most people miss. Jacob has just deceived his father, stolen the blessing meant for Esau. The household has erupted. Esau's rage is volcanic. And in the middle of this crisis, Isaac sends Jacob away, this time intentionally, to find a wife from among Rebekah's family in Paddan Aram. Listen to what Isaac says as Jacob leaves. "You shall not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban your mother's brother." Clear, deliberate, explicit. And then Genesis 28:6 gives us one of the most quietly devastating verses in the entire patriarchal narrative. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women," and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan Aram, and when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, that should stop you cold. When Esau saw, for the first time, or at least for the first time recorded, Esau saw. He saw what his choices had done. He saw that his Canaanite wives displeased his father. He saw Jacob being honored precisely by doing the thing Esau had failed to do. And what does Esau do? He goes and marries again. This time, a daughter of Ishmael, Mahalath, also called Basemath in other passages, clearly an attempt to marry someone closer to the covenant family. Most people read this as Esau trying to make things right. But read the text again carefully. He didn't leave his Hittite wives. He didn't repent of the choices that caused his parents' grief. He added a third wife, as if one more marriage could undo the damage of two. This is Esau in miniature. Always reacting. Always trying to fix the present moment without fully reckoning with the pattern. And here is the heartbreaking irony. The very thing that might have commended him to his father choosing a wife from Ishmael's line still fell outside the specific guidance Isaac had just given Jacob. He was so close to understanding, and yet still slightly off, still reaching for the covenant with one hand while holding on to his own choices with the other. This story is not really about Esau's wives, not at its core. It is about the collision between inheritance and identity. Esau inherited the position of firstborn, the blessing of Isaac's love, the physical strength of a man built for the ancient world. But he never fully claimed the identity of the covenant. And there's a difference. Inheritance is what you receive by circumstance. Identity is what you choose to build your life around. Jacob, for all his deception, for all his calculating manipulation, understood something Esau never quite grasped, that the covenant was worth fighting for, worth scheming for, worth crossing a desert, serving 14 years, wrestling an angel for. Esau treated the covenant like furniture. It was always there. It would always be there. He could attend to it later, and his marriages reflect that. He didn't choose women who would help him carry the covenant into the next generation. He chose women who were available, desirable, present, and the covenant consequences were someone else's problem. Now, here's where this gets deeply, uncomfortably modern. How many of us treat our most sacred inheritances the same way? The faith we were raised in, the values we said we believed, the commitments we made in moments of clarity that slowly erode under the weight of what feels good right now. Esau is not a monster. He is every person who values the immediate over the eternal, who chooses comfort over covenant, who assumes the blessing will still be there until it isn't. And Rebekah, we don't talk enough about Rebekah's grief. She is one of the most actively engaged mothers in all of Genesis. Plotting, praying, pushing, protecting. She heard God's voice before anyone else in the family did. She understood the covenant stakes in ways that even Isaac seemed, at times, to underestimate. And she had to watch. She had to watch her firstborn son dismantle, piece by piece, everything she had sacrificed to build. There's a line in Genesis 27. After Jacob secures the blessing, and Esau's rage becomes dangerous, where Rebekah says to Isaac, "I am weary of my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife of the Hittite women, such as these, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me?" Most people see this as a strategy, a way to get Jacob sent away safely before Esau can harm him. And it is that. But it is also true. She really was weary. These women really had cost her something irretrievable. And when she sent Jacob away, supposedly for a season, supposedly until Esau's anger cooled, she never saw her son again. We don't have a recorded reunion between Rebekah and Jacob. The woman who risked everything to secure the blessing for her chosen son died, it seems, before he came home. The grief of Esau's choices had tentacles she never fully escaped. Stop here, somewhere in Canaan, in a tent that smelled of old fires and decades of wandering. A woman named Rebekah watched her eldest son bring home a wife, then another. She watched the household she had built, the household she had left everything to enter, begin to fill with voices that did not call on her God. She had no language for what she felt that wasn't called grief. And the heaviest thing about grief is this: it is quietest when it is deepest. She didn't rage. She didn't leave. She stayed. She managed. She navigated. And the bitterness settled into her spirit like sediment into still water. Meanwhile, Esau went on hunting. He came home with wild game. His father smiled. And I wonder if Esau ever fully understood, not intellectually, but in his bones, what his choices cost the woman who birthed him. Most of us won't. Most of us won't see our blind spots until someone we love has quietly been paying for them for years. That's not comfortable, but it might be the most important thing this story has to say. The Bible doesn't give Judith and Basemath a redemption arc. It doesn't give them dialogue. It doesn't tell us whether they were cruel women or simply foreign ones. It doesn't tell us if they ever came to honor Rebekah's God. It gives them two things: a name and a consequence. And maybe that's the honest weight of the story. Not that they were villains, but that their presence in that household represented a fracture. A place where the covenant was weakest, where the future was most uncertain, where a mother's spirit broke not in a single blow but in 1,000 ordinary days. Esau eventually reconciled with Jacob. He wept when they met again. There was something tender still alive in him. But some things, once broken, leave a mark even after they're repaired. Rebekah's grief was one of them. So here is the question this story leaves you with: not what legacy are you building, but who is quietly paying for the choices you haven't examined yet? Because the covenant was never just about you. It was always about who comes after. Before you leave, I want to know, who do you relate to most in this story? Rebekah's grief, Esau's blind spots, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. These conversations matter more than you think.